last thing, this will be the end. So we get to the 1950s. Remember, there's this era where we go crazy with getting God in the middle of our government. And it's amazing what's going on. When Eisenhower had his inauguration, his first inauguration, the first float that he had in his inaugural parade was a Back to God float. And they had pictures of God stuff all over the place. I mean, he was very religious. We had all sorts of God stuff throughout. The Secretary of the Department of State, and Secretary of State, and you can see, I mean, there's a million people, everybody's talking about God. The Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Earl Warren, goes to one of these prayer breakfasts. He says, yes, the United States is a Christian nation. He's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We have this everybody's talking about God. There's quotes that say, that it was almost un-American to not believe in God at the time. And there were people who actually said that blatantly. Anyhow, so they come up, and there's this guy, Matthew Rother, who's a numismatist, the guy who collects coins and bills. And he says, and he's in, the story is, he was in church on Sunday. They passed the plate, which I can't do in my church. They passed the plate, and he noticed that there's no God we trust on the currency. Coins have it, but no currency has it back then. He says, this is terrible. So he writes a letter directly to the Treasury, and he says that the sentiment and trust of God, that we're doing this to affirm our trust in God, and he gets a congressman involved, and he talks about the thing that we need to get God in there. The House Committee on Banking starts talking, they put this under, the heading that they put this whole discussion under is religious inscriptions. I think that's a hint that it's religious. They allude to this, you probably are a Christian thing that started it all off. They put that the trust of our people in God should be declared on our national coins. At the base of our freedom is our faith in God and the desire of Americans to live by His will and by His guidance. The legend relating to the power of Almighty God should be placed on the currency. And the whole thing is it's all God. And then you also have things in the congressional record. I have this graph which I have in my complaint. And if you look in the index of the congressional record is all the stuff that goes on in Congress. And you look at stuff that has to do with religion. For the 5 years before 1954, from 49 to 54 to 53, if you look, there's an average of 3 references to religion per year. Okay? Not bad. Right? For the 5 years from 1955 to 1959, there's 177 on average, right? An increase of 50-fold, right, in terms of religion that they have. I mean, the country was going crazy with religion. So anyhow, one of the quotes that they put in the congressional record was the guy who introduced the bill to have under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, who put, an atheistic American is a contradiction in terms. Can you believe that in the congressional? Can you imagine a black American is a contradiction in terms? A Jewish American is a contradiction in terms? We go crazy. An atheistic American is a contradiction? No big deal. So I think that I can prove that this thing was done for religious purposes. The Supreme Court has upheld the limit test in the Ten Commandments case. A case just came out about 3 weeks ago in the Ninth Circuit where they said we are going with the limit test, and if the purpose prong is violated, the law is unconstitutional. So they're going to have to do a lot of poppycock. Not that they can't do that, they've done that many times before, but they really are going to have to go through a lot of hogwash to rule against me in this case. So that's where I stand. Thank you, and if we have questions, I'm going to go ahead and yes? Yep.
Do you have a website where you can...
Yes, and you can sign up for the church there too. It's the first, it's restorethepledge.com. Okay, and it talks about all these cases. You can read all my pleadings, to people who say all these things that I did. I send them to the website. If you can find anything in any of those works, let me know. And the thing with the church too, as he said, it doesn't cost you anything, and it's not a bad idea. We every once a month, just to stop, we only meet on the new moon when the sky is the blackest, and you can see furthest into time. And you can contemplate our existence and think about the cycle. Cycle, something ends and something begins. It's a nice little thing. So join us on that. Okay? A little camaraderie among non-believers. Yes, no.
How much are you selling your CDs for?
Oh, I told them that. They're $10 a piece. And they have some good songs. One of the favorites in there is there's a when the case first came out, I knew I was going to win. I told you, the two judges, there was no question in my mind. So I actually put in a phone line. My normal phone line doesn't have my name. It's listed under Lee Barnett, actually, which comes from Lee versus Weissman, which is a case that said that you couldn't have graduation prayer, and West Virginia v. Barnett, which was a case that you can't make people pledge allegiance. So I Lee Barnett, that's my name. That's listed. But I decided I'd have one listed under my name because I knew people would try to find me and they wouldn't know to look for Lee Barnett. So I put in a special line, and when the case came out, the phone just rang nonstop the whole time. So I was trying to catch up with the tapes. I only got about 7 tapes. I could have probably filled 30. I just didn't get back to the machine in time. So I took snippets of the things that some of the people said, Well, I have a song, it's called My God is in My Soul. And it goes, my God is in my soul. Da, 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 da. Of malice I have not, oh, it would never say. And then I cut in, you atheist piece of. And so it all rhymes, but I have the whole thing. So but if you listen to that with kids, make sure, because it has some vile language. I didn't cut out. But thank you.
You need to sign.
I will sign it. Yes, it is a felt tip. Yes.
Are there no religious groups that are willing to support you? I would think that the Amish or the Mennonites or the Hutterites
Or the Christians. There's lots of Christians. I had
want to support you because that would protect them in their unique religious practices.
And Christians, you have it right on. I tell people, this is protecting you. This protects us all. This is not it's not a case of people who believe in God versus people who don't believe in God. It's a case of people who believe in equality and the constitutional protections that we all have versus people who don't believe in that. And I have Christians all the time, and monotheists and Jews and everybody else, who said, you're right, there was a brief by a Jewish group on my side when I went to the Supreme Court. There was a brief by 31 named Jewish and Christian clergy on my side. We had people, if they understand it, then they understand it.
I would even think the Rastafarians, any unique religious
You don't have to be
group.
unique. You keep accepting. I agree with you that there's something to that, but they're protected because they all have some sense of God. But it's Christians too. Maybe someday in the future things change. Remember, Christians were only 3% of the Roman Empire at the beginning. Now they're the vast majority. If we become mostly atheistic in the future, which is I think there's a significant likelihood, this will protect the Christians just like we're protecting the atheists now. Exactly. Good. Tell them. Make sure they understand.
You have a question over here?
Yes.
What kind of backlash have you had? You talked a little bit about on your CD some of the messages you had in your answer machine. Threats to your life, or has it been pretty tame?
Every once in a while I get somebody saying something. I think they're just venting. I was very frightened when I first did this. I actually bought a property and I went through all sorts of hoops to make sure it was registered so that nobody could find my name, which by the way doesn't work. But anyway, I did it through a trust and all this other stuff, where I was going to build just so that nobody could find me. And I was very afraid for my daughter, so that's why I didn't have her name, and she has a different last name. That was one of the reasons I mentioned that I have a daughter, but I didn't mention her name. And by the way, really interesting in that regard, when the case first came out, I got a call from the National Enquirer saying that they knew who my daughter was and they were going to print her name. And the call actually went to my dad. And he told me, he said, I told him to forget it. So I'm panic-stricken. I don't want her name out there. So I go through it. It took me almost a whole day to find out who it was that made the phone call because he didn't get a message. And finally got in touch with the guy. I said, look, this is not her case. It's my case. I really don't want her getting in it. And they said, okay. And they didn't touch it. And so her name didn't get out there until the mother went out to protect her. That's what I got. There was a bomb threat at one place I taught once at the University of Toledo. I don't know if it was in my honor, but I assume it was. But I'm not frightened anymore, if anything. Just people that, yeah.
What does your daughter feel about this?
I don't discuss her. Great kid. Yes.
I just got this little email the other day, just appropriately. Believe in God? This is real short. NBC this morning had a poll on this question. They had the highest number of responses that they had ever had for one of their polls, and the percentage was same as this. 86% keep the words "in God we trust" and "God in the pledge of allegiance." 40% against. That is pretty commanding public
40% against?
14%. This is pretty commanding public response. I was asked to send this on if I agree or delete it. If I didn't, now it's your turn. It is said that 86% of Americans believe in God. And therefore, I have a very hard time understanding why there is such a fuss about having God in we trust on our money and having God in the pledge. Why is the world catering to this 14%? Amen.